Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
This is the Big Apple. There are 8 million stories here. This is Wall Street. There's only one story here. Green. Wall Street is a man's world.
50,000 for blowing him, and all I had to do was moan and be excited.
Let's go. Liddy Falwell.
Cocksuckers.
Wall Street is where the action is rough.
Look, I'm demolished.
Wall Street is where fortunes are made and lost overnight.
Boom, boom, boom. From Tyler one day to your dummy corporation the next.
No, this is not the time to panic. Look out, guys. Panic in the street.
This is Wanda.
Ah, the new girl.
Oh, the new woman.
The new girl.
Slightly shady.
She wants part of the action.
Oh, a spade is spade. Art, I stole Wanko.
She'll do anything to get ahead.
I don't think your wife would be too pleased to know that the new girl in the New York office has been munching your cock. You know, I've been looking for a handsome stud like you.
You have?
Wanda whips Wall Street. Wanda's world is sex.
If I don't give you a blowjob right now, I think I'm gonna die.
Is fast.
AT&T.
And sex. Wanda's world is opulence and sex. Wanda is Veronica Hart.
Wanda, I can feel my tongue right down the crack of your ass.
Oh. Where is she? I'll murder her.
Wanda whips Wall Street. A film by Larry-Revene, a Platinum Pictures release.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me is the hostess with the mostest, Ms. Heather Drain.
Hello, hello.
Also back in the booth this week is Mr. Kevin-Heffernan.
Good morning, folks.
This week we are discussing Larry-Revene's Wanda Whips Wall Street. Released in 1981, the film stars Jane Hamilton, a.k.a. Veronica Hart, as Wanda Brandt, a tough businesswoman who comes to Wall Street to ply her feminine wiles and business acumen in order to take over the company for which she works. She has a head for business and a bod for sin. Is there anything wrong with that? Kevin, when was the first time that you saw Wanda Whips Wall Street, and what did you think?
I first saw the trailer in our local adult movie theater a few weeks before the film came out. That would be fall of 1981, and the trailer looked great. But I didn't really see the movie until the art theater that I was managing put it in as a midnight booking. We had the Thursday night X-rated films as part of our programming, and I just thought it was great. It was funny. It moved really, really quickly. And, of course, Jane Hamilton, Veronica Hart gives a stellar performance, which I'm sure we'll discuss in great detail.
And how about you, Heather?
I first saw the trailer for it before I ever saw the movie, and I believe it was through a comp called Smut Palace Insanity, which is a really, really great trailer compilation. But I didn't see the movie until Distripix did their special edition release of it, where they remastered it beautifully so. I thought it was very cute. Of course, Veronica Hart is, she's one of the biggest stars from that era for a very good reason. And she shines bright as she always does in the film. And I thought I especially loved Tish Ambrose as well.
This is yet another movie that I am checking out for the first time this year. I bought the DVD or the Blu-ray, when it came out through Distripix, and I held on to it for a long time, and then was talking to Larry-Revene. Actually, he's been on the show a few times, and he lists this as one of his favorites. So I was like, all right, got to check this thing out. And it definitely did not disappoint. And I figured, with the swamp taking over the White House, I figured it made a lot of sense to talk about a movie where they're kind of skewering Reaganomics, and it almost seems like the good guys are going to win when it comes to this.
Yes, we'll talk about the ending, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely there are spoilers on this episode. So if you haven't seen Wanda Whips Wall Street and you don't want to have anything ruined, turn this thing off and then come on back after you watch the movie. You will not regret seeing this one.
And that's not a joke, folks. Golden Age adult films really do have incredibly well thought out plots with actual reversals and recognitions and stuff that they teach you about when you take screenwriting courses in college.
And I was surprised at just how little sex there is in this movie. Of course, it is used. I always compare good adult cinema to good chopsaki cinema, where, you've got fight scenes in certain places and they move along the plot. And in good adult cinema, you have good sex scenes and they move along the plot. And there is so much of the sex in here being used to help Wanda. She uses sex as a way to work her way up through this company, this Tyler Security and Brokerage Incorporated, in order to secure all of these stocks. And like I said in the intro, she's, using her beauty, using her sex appeal in order to kind of blackmail these guys that are working with her into signing over their shares. She will usually sleep with these guys and sleep with, as a euphemism, she'll have sex with these guys or give blowjobs and then say, are you married? Oh, wouldn't it be terrible if your wife found out about this? Why did you just sign over all these shares to me and we'll just forget the whole thing?
And they even work a couple of variations on that stinger at the end of the scene.
I love your comparison to chopsaki cinema. That's I never would have thought of using that metaphorically. The thing that's interesting with this film, and to give a little background for the listeners, is the film opens up when we see our titular Wanda leaving Altoona and her company of Wanko. Or Wonko. Wanko sounds better. Also, Kevin, I don't know if you agree with me as a fellow Southerner. I feel like Southerners more inclined. We're more to say like an like it's a Wanko.
Yeah, exactly.
She's the top of the food chain in Altoona, but now she's ready to go to New York and, be the big fish in the big pond now. But then it immediately leads into like her interview at Tyler. And it goes into a sex scene pretty quickly, which kind of sets you up to think initially, like, okay, like if you're somebody not familiar with classic adult, like all three of us, at this point, you're going to be like, oh, it's going to be one of those. It's going to be a sex scene every 5 minutes. It's going to be cheesy. But then the sex ends up kind of quickly, and it's kind of like it's comedic. It's not really done for erotic effect. That's just one of the many cool things about this film is there's certain directions you think it's going to take you in as an adult film, but yet it doesn't really.
It almost cuts from her massaging her breasts. I mean, there's such little sex to her, to that cut of her on the phone with, and how would you describe this guy? Is this like her investment broker, or how would you describe this character who kind of sets up this shell corporation for her in order to do what she needs to do and put all the stocks into one area and make sure that nobody can kind of trace it back to her?
A financial planner, a stockbroker, screenwriting manuals would call him a confidant that helps us get all kinds of exposition in, but that's not a nice thing to say.
Your notes are so much smarter than mine. I think I have the word mook in mine. He was just sort of like a glorious, he literally calls her toots.
I was surprised that he called her toots. I was like, I wouldn't think that she would associate with somebody that would call her toots, but okay.
Especially when toots is used later in the film by Ron Hudd as that loft party Lothario.
Yeah, we'll get to Captain Mustache here in a little bit. So we have Wanda, and she's quickly already kind of like establishing her ground at Tyler. And then we have Tish Ambrose come back. We see Tish at the very beginning, and Tish plays Wanda's secretary.
This is what's going to trip us up throughout the whole thing. Tish Ambrose's character is called Janie, so we can't refer to Veronica as Jane, or it will be incomprehensible.
But Janie, she's missing her boss and her friend and comes to the big city, quickly becomes, like, I believe, Mike, you have in the script, her Girl Friday, which is like such a perfect descriptor of her character. She's totally a Girl Friday. And these two, I don't know what you guys think. I totally got like almost like a weird, like, late 30s screwball comedy vibe with Wanda and Janie as characters. They have this dynamic that's so just charming and cute. And it never turns sexual. And that's another twist in adult film. Usually when you have two girls who are friends in adult films, the audience is going to expect them to have a total girl scene, where it's like, oh, you look so tense,
Right. And the third character, Lisa Rogers, played by Samantha Fox, she doesn't have sex with either of them, either Jane or Wanda.
I'm trying to remember if there is a girl-on-girl scene in the film.
I don't think there is. I rewatched it last night, and I don't remember any. Yeah, yes, Charlotte, adult films do exist without girl that aren't gay porn.
I mean, it is distinctly hetero, if memory serves.
There's the double blowjob with Tish Ambrose and Sharon Mitchell on the Biff, the party guest, but that's just almost implied that the two women are.
Yeah, because you don't really see. Yeah.
And for a little while, I thought there would be a homoerotic scene with the one coworker of hers who is definitely not interested in her sexually. I was like, oh, well, she's going to have to get something else going on here to get this guy to sign over his stocks.
Yes, Hartman Callison, played by Kurt Mann. He appears in a number of the Chuck Vincent, Larry Revene, Amaro Brothers, Ron Sullivan movies. And I know in Blonde Ambition, he has a non-sex role as the gay lover of one of the characters that Susie Mandel seduces. So, yes, I think he eased into those kinds of roles.
Oh, he's amazing in Blonde Ambition. I when I saw Kurt Mann's name in the credits when I first watched this, I was clapping. I was like, yes, I love him. And he's great here. But I wonder too, because there's some cute kind of interplay when she first meets him, and her boss, who she's just had sex with, introduces them, and he says something to the boss about, oh, my drawer down there is stuck.
Congratulations, my dear. I almost envy you. Winston, would you mind stepping over here for a minute? My drawers are stuck. Humid weather, you know.
Oh. Doesn't he kind of wink? Is there like a little wink? It's like, whoa, hey now, what's going on here? I was a little disappointed we didn't get any follow-up with that. But I'm always happy to see Kurt Mann. He's definitely, that's always the beauty of seeing anything that's like Larry or the Amaro Brothers or Chuck Vincent, is you're always going to have non-sex actors who are just, great character actors that stand out and just kind of flesh out the film in a non-fleshy way.
Well, even the cleaning lady appears in a number of the Chuck Vincent films, and to have her come in the background when Wanda is trying to get something out of a desk, and instead of just having her walk by with the rolling cart, we have her singing a Lead Belly song, which is just a wonderful little comic touch.
I was really glad to see the actor, I think he goes by the name Carter Tweesdale in this one, Boomer Tibbs, who actually I talked about him in the Working Girls episode, the Lizzie Borden film. He's one of the clients in there. And he's just amazing. I always love to see him. He's got such an amazing face. And I'm glad that he gets in on the action as well, because he doesn't look like a quote unquote typical porn actor, because he's kind of a goofy looking dude, but I love him.
Chuck's films frequently had these unlikely sexual performers in them. I think it's one of the reasons that they were so distinctive and so friendly and welcoming. So we're talking about Chuck Vincent. Mike, can you tell us who Chuck Vincent was? I've been talking about him as if everyone, went to his birthday party recently.
They should have if they did it. That's shame on you, people.
Well, Chuck unfortunately wouldn't have been there. But yeah, Chuck Vincent, he had a very interesting career. I actually read about him before I saw any of his films. One of my writers in Cashiers to Cinemark wrote a whole article about his early non-porn films and just kind of like some innocent, fun type of movies. But he was terrific. He was pretty much a porn auteur. And, just an auteur in general. And he was the one who directed Cleo Leo, which we talked about, I think that was just last year, one of the least downloaded episodes of The Projection Booth. And it really should get some more love, as should that film. But I think that was one of those awkward movies that seems like it should be a porn film, but it really isn't. So I think people were kind of disappointed that it didn't have more sex to it.
No, Chuck Vincent, definitely. I think the more love that man can get, the better. I mean, he's often credited. There were a handful of directors that were really viewed as like, if anybody's going to bring adult into the mainstream and have it fully critically respected, Chuck Vincent was one of the big dogs in that race. You know, it was him, Damiano, the sadly late Radley Metzger, aka Henry Paris, as well as I would say Cecil Howard and Anthony
Spinelli also.
Yeah. Spinelli, absolutely. I'm so glad, Mike, you mentioned his R-rated work because, yeah, there's some gems in there too. I definitely recommend Sex Appeal, which was his R-rated remake of Fascination, I believe, which has Jeffrey Hurst in it, aka Jeff Eagle. And he's hilarious.
So yeah, Wanda and her girl Friday, they kind of tear through so many of these execs and are looking pretty good as far as getting enough stocks to take over this company until the company hires some investigators. And I love the introduction of these investigators, both via dialogue talking about them, and then when they actually introduce these characters of Ed Drummond, played by Ron Jeremy, and Lou Perrini, played by the wonderful, wonderful Jamie Gillis. And their introduction where they're having sex on a boat with these women out in the harbor of New York is just terrific. I mean, these guys are in their prime when it comes to this, to the point where you're just like, oh my God, is that Ron Jeremy? Like the first time you saw him, because you forget just how handsome and striking this guy was when he was younger, because now, of course, he's still with us, thank goodness. But, he's older and he's put on a couple pounds, but back then, man, he was rock hard. He was just awesome to look at. And he's such a great actor. I love him and I love Jamie Gillis.
I've hired a special securities investigator. Now, it's possible, even quite likely, that the culprit or culprits are working within the firm. There's only one man that can stop them.
Vesco.
Liddy? Falwell. No, I'm talking about the world's foremost safecracker. I mean, crackpot. Hell, Lou Perrini.
Absolutely. Positively. He's the only choice.
I like that Perrini.
Ditto.
Ron Jeremy really carries a lot of the comedy in this film that's not done by Veronica Hart in his interaction with both the Jamie Gillis character, Lou, and in his interaction with Jamie, the Tish Ambrose character. There are entire scenes that in another actor's hand would be there just to move the plot forward, and he always turns these scenes into compelling bits of either pantomime or verbal comedy. He's really extraordinary here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ron Jeremy, even if one is not a fan of his sexual performance, his comedy, but also his, dramatic styles, abilities too are so great. I know, Mike, you and I have talked about this before with, I believe, was it the Spoker episode? Ron Jeremy really doesn't get enough credit for being kind of a multi-talented kind of guy. It's actually, I think it's a shame, even though it's given him probably more fame and more money than some of his peers from this era. I mean, he's much more than the Hedgehog. Yeah, I thought him and Tish Ambrose here, especially as those two characters got to interact more, they were very funny and cute together. And he's great. And of course, Jamie, one of my favorite scenes in this movie was like when Jamie, Alan Anderson's character, who was Boomer Tibbs, that was his character. Alan Anderson has just passed, and they take Jamie, Lou Perrini, and Ron Jeremy, who's his assistant, to this room. And
he was a fine man. Just recently passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll tell you, we'll set up you and Ned in here, if you don't mind. Some people get a little spooked by that sort of thing.
Oh, I thrive on it.
Good.
I literally hand clapped, and then I was like, yes, that's Jamie. You know, there's certain things that Jamie-Gillis could just nail in a look or phrasing, you know, and it's like, oh, that's the man right there.
Oh, yeah.
Less is more with Jamie. He was extraordinary.
As the movie progressed, somebody mentioned that it feels like a screwball comedy, and I totally agree with it. As the movie was progressing and the relationship between Veronica Hart's character and the Jamie-Gillis character kind of blossomed, as well as that other relationship that Ron Jeremy is having, I, for some reason, was reminded a lot of a Rock Hudson, Doris Day type of comedy, especially like with Gillis as Rock Hudson and Veronica as Doris Day, and then Ron Jeremy almost as the Tony Randall, you know, especially during that end sequence when they're off together, when Jamie and Jane, or Veronica and Jamie-Gillis are off together, and then and Ron Jeremy's back in the office kind of digging up who's behind this this front company. It totally reminds me of like Tony Randall finding out the truth about Rock Hudson, or that he's the one who's been going out with Doris Day, who's the one that Tony Randall really wants to go out with, and then rushing up to the country house to kind of explode their relationship. I don't know. I'm sure that I'm probably the only one that's going to compare this to Pillow Talk, but that's where I was coming from with it, because it has that classic vibe to it. It uses these tropes that we've seen in such a good way. And again, like we were saying before, the sex is very hot, but the sex is very secondary to the plot, and it is used to just kind of move these things along.
That's an extremely apt comparison, Mike. And especially tonally, too, because this film, if one wanted to get darker with the subject matter, one could. Because, I mean, if you really think about the implication that, you know, this is a world where, you know, a cunning, intelligent, bright woman, basically for her to kind of get the most efficient, you know, means of getting ahead, she has to fuck these guys and blackmail them. You know, if you really think about that, that's depressing. That's not, you know, you wouldn't, but the way that the cast handles it, the way that Larry handles it as a director, it's like a, you know, it's like a bonbon or something. It's like a, you know, little pastry or something. It's very light. It's very fun. Any chance for darkness, you know, they don't really go there, which is probably, other than the twist ending, which we'll get to in a little bit. But for the most part, you know, it's, no, it totally has that vibe of those, of, you know, because Pillow Talk's a light film. That era had so many just light pastry type comedies.
I think one of the most apt comparisons between this film and some of those 50s comedies is we have this gallery of masculine grotesques in here. These utter abject specimens of enervated, useless men, weak, stupid, easily led. That's something we see in a lot of the 50s comedies, in the Frank Tashlin films, for example, and some of the, you mentioned Pillow Talk, the Nick Adams character in that is or the Doris Day's boss, played by the guy who later played Dr. Bellows on I Dream of Jeannie, the antique dealer, played by Marcel Dalio. These are all these fey loser guys against which the Rock Hudson character is going to be seen more favorably. And I think these character actors, the non-sex character actors in this film, particularly the men, are really, really great at bringing out the comic potential of these people who have a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous amount of power, and they have absolutely no talent, no smarts, no charisma at all.
You know, that's one of the things that makes this film, you know, a cut above, I think, is that it's, you know, it does have a brain to it. One of my few complaints about Wanda Whips Wall Street was maybe there are times where I almost wished it was a little bit longer, because I felt like there are moments and characters that could have been fleshed out more. But, you know, my feeling is if you watch a film and you wished it was longer, then that's not a real negative. A real negative is when you're like, Jesus, is this ever going to end?
Yep. I was really hoping to see a subplot with the character of Lillian, played by Patricia Dale, the woman in the office with the yellow glasses, who says to her when she comes in,
"Oh, the new woman." Well, don't expect any breaks around here, my dear. Not from me, at any rate.
I was waiting for some kind of confrontation between her character and Veronica's character, Wanda. It seemed like that was a potential mine of comic gold that they just left unexplored. But I totally agree with you that this film does leave us wanting more, including a different ending.
Personally, the film really picked up with the party scene.
Yes.
And, of course, I think we have to mention the bizarre comedy of how that scene gets started, because Veronica Hart gets into Wall Street, which I believe was that shot at the actual Wall Street stock exchange building. But she sneaks in by basically seducing it like this very nerdly guy, and gets him to close his eyes and dirty talks while she puts on his clothes. And passes by security. Security, I guess, back then was definitely not what it is now, because you have this beautiful woman in glasses. I mean, Veronica Hart is one of the most stunning women, in film, not just adults. She's gorgeous. But she's got glasses on and a big coat, and he's like, "Okay, thank you, sir." Like, she goes in and makes a bunch of deals, but then that's how you meet the Samantha Fox character, Samantha Fox again is one of those actresses, when you see her pop up in these films, you're like, oh, okay, good. Life is good because she's great. And then we get to the party. And the party scene, for me, the film, when that party scene happened, I was like, oh, okay, now we're really cooking, because you have this great editing and these weird, just all of these weird interstitial characters and these bon mots. The phrase weasel pelts is in there. I mean, it actually kind of reminded me a lot of the, when you first see Z-Man and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Russ
Absolutely.
Symes. When you go to Z-Man's party and you just see all these great kooky characters and just all of these great one-liners, it totally has that vibe with some fantastic colored gel lighting. I mean, the lighting actually reminded me of a Cecil Howard film. It was like, this is particularly like Firestorm and some parts of Scoundrels. But the party scene, oh my God, that's so good.
Well, you mentioned weasel pelts and Z-Man, so I can get rid of a page or so of my notes here.
We're in a good business when we have notes that literally say weasel pelts and Z-Man. That's
Weasel pelts is highlighted in green here on my...
What do you do for a living?
I made my fortune in weasel pelts.
Later.
The party scene is one of the scenes, I think, where the movie doesn't let us forget that we're looking at comedy and satire. That's a thing where the tone of the film, the comic tone, and its distance and its contempt for the world that it's portraying really kind of gels in a really great way. There's no one there at that party who is anything other than a completely despicable person. It's really quite remarkable.
I think the dollar's going to dip.
You're a dip.
Yeah, it's really capturing those 80s slime buckets at the opening of the 80s.
Of course, they're models of probity and integrity compared to what we have now. But, back then, I guess it was a subject for satire.
The complete shark pit of that party but again, another testament to Larry. I mean, God, I love Larry-Revene. It's just like, it's light though. And again, another thing where you could really make it something really dark and cynical and ugly, but yet it's still fun and funny. This is where you have, for any of you classic adult film fans out there like ourselves, you get to see Sharon Mitchell pop up with, yes. You're just like, oh my God, it's Sharon Mitchell. Yay. And George Payne, who I'm always happy to see. And his scene with Samantha Fox was great for me on two levels. One, I love how she literally is like fanning herself with the fan while he's attending to her needs. But then there's some great close-up shots of him. And George is such an intense actor and performer that it's like, to me, I know this wasn't any attention, but I'm just weird enough where I like stuff like this, and I like contrasts at times where he looks like, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill her or something, because he's got that great just George Payne. I mean, nobody does intensity quite like George Payne. I mean, he's just great. And the lighting in all of that. And then you have the aforementioned Ron Hudd. I'm like, what broker firm? I mean, he obviously got there with his girlfriend. I'm like, that dude this guy's supposed to work at a, work at a stock exchange.
He's got platonic ideal of what people think of a late 70s, early 80s male porn performer. He's wearing the aviator shades. He's got an acetate shirt. He's got the mustache, as you mentioned earlier. And he's just kind of walking around like, his dick is leading him, from one room to another. And he's really, really good in these little walk-on roles. I've seen him in a bunch of the Cecil Howard, Ron Sullivan films. And he's actually in Deep Inside Annie Sprinkle, which kind of surprised me. I just sort of imagined him as this sort of, in real life, sort of the sullen garage mechanic, hung like a horse, porno stud. And in the commentary on the DVD, which I got to tell everybody to run out and get the District Pix Blu-ray. It's really astonishing. Larry and Veronica Hart mention that in real life, he was an incredibly accomplished metal sculptor who did these industrial installations, and just a really, really talented and ambitious and hardworking artist who works under the name Jim Messina, and he's still active. He's just one of these guys that, we have this vision of what these performers were like in real life based on our sort of retroactive, faux sophisticated, campy contempt for some aspects of, classic adult. And then there's the anti-sex worker bias that many of us have, where we imagine that, if these people, didn't have genitalia that function at the drop of a hat, they wouldn't have any other, means of supporting themselves, all that negative stuff that people say about adult performers. And to find that he was, and still is, this incredibly intelligent, sensitive, accomplished artist is really just one of the many delights to be found in Veronica and Larry's commentary on the film on the DVD.
I think the thing that's a joy about investigating films like this, and, we're so lucky to live in an age where we have shows like this, and the work that you do, Mike and Kevin, and also, definitely like shows like the Rialto Report, where people are realizing, I think, more and more that a lot of the artists that made these films are like a lot of the films themselves, which is, means people kind of make assumptions just from like the superficial, but then if they investigate it or even just take a little bit of their time to watch some of these films or learn about some of these personalities, they realize, well, yeah, of course there's more than meets the eye. It's like I've always said, Picasso had explicit sex in his paintings, but nobody calls him a pornographer. So,
well, but he was hated at the beginning.
Pablo Picasso was never called an asshole.
Not like you.
Now, guys, we know that's a lie. I love Jonathan Richman. Plenty of people call Pablo Picasso an asshole. His ex-wives alone, I'm sure.
Yep.
The party scene was great. That could have been a whole movie for my taste. And then we get up to probably another favorite part for me of this film, which is very John Waters-like. Speaking of great cult film directors, because we have a little bit of shrimping. Not total full sail shrimping, but shrimp-like? I don't know, shrimp.
Yeah. Shrimp adjacent.
Yes, oh my God. Wow. That is a sentence I was not prepared to hear at before 10 in the morning.
I wasn't prepared to utter it.
That's beautiful. That scene, and we get to see like Veronica and Tish Ambrose as cat burglars.
Right, like Irma Vep, from the Fouillade films, right, running around these lithe characters all in black with the masks. Really great stuff. Yeah.
Well, and then the thing that just adds to it is the way that piece of library music that they used got retranslated later on in pop culture to be the People's Court theme. And as soon as the music came up, I was like, oh my God, this is the People's Court. And I'm just laughing so hysterically because I used to watch the People's Court all the time when it was Judge Wapner during the early days of it. There was nothing better than watching People's Court, especially late at night. And yeah, to hear that music come up and just be booming on the soundtrack. And it was hilarious when the opening Misty Beethoven soundtrack was put out, that had that particular piece of library music on there. And just within 5 notes, I was like, oh my God, it's the People's Court.
Same thing with Malibu High.
Yes.
And that one's got also the SCTV little piece of interstitial music.
Another little bit of library music, trivia humor. The Something Weird video theme library track turns up in a lot of late 60s NFL films documentaries. And so it's great to have, the Chargers John Facenda, the Chargers' offensive line was no match for the ferocious Minnesota front four, and then you hear the dun, 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 dun. It's pretty cool. I highly recommend that.
Guys, did I get a character name wrong? I have to be honest. Like, even though I rewatched the film last night, a lot of the male characters that weren't like Perrini, they all were very similar to my brain. I don't know, like, Mike, if you ever go through this, doing these notes for all the episodes you do, where character names get a little jumbled.
Especially in a movie like this, where so many of the male characters are just kind of interchangeable. It's like Corporate Guy 1, Corporate Guy 2.
Yeah. Okay, good. At least it's not just because I was trying to remember the name, because I love this scene with because in my notes I have it as Anderson, but I thought Anderson was the guy that died. So now
that's Mr. Margolis.
Okay, thank you.
I had to go through 3 or 4 databases to find some of these characters' names. For example, I don't think her Mook is ever named, is he?
I could not know, because right after he was introduced, I'm like, ooh, keep an eye out, because he's going to pop back up. And, and he was such a funny character.
I watched the movie twice, and the second time I kept waiting to eventually find out his name. And then I looked on all the databases, and he wasn't listed as a performer on the Internet Adult Film Database, which is usually pretty comprehensive. He doesn't seem to have a character listing on IMDb. And while we're doing housekeeping in this regard, I have one more question for you guys. There is a character in the IMDb cast listing whose name is
Wendy Willingquim.
Wendy Willingquim. Who is that?
We will talk about Wendy Willingquim in the second half of the show.
Okay. Well, then I will be just demure and submissive during that discussion, because I'm not there. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
One thing that we could add to this discussion, I almost feel like there's sort of a cool metaphor here. If all three of us either didn't hear, obviously some of the male character names are never really used, or if we got them confused because they are all interchangeable, and it's just how like the symbolic corporate white heterosexual oppressor male
exactly.
that we associate, and usually pretty rightfully so, with running corporate America.
Well, and to that end, we should probably talk about the end of the film. This is probably one of the most depressing films. I almost said depressing adult films, but I would say just depressing films overall, because we have had Wanda working so hard with her female compatriots to help overturn this company, and she is right there on the brink, and it is one of those like ticking clock kind of things. Like, as of 10 a.m. on this particular morning, she is going to be she's going to be able to take charge and have the majority stockholder position and be able to take charge of the company. And that's that moment that I mentioned earlier, that whole idea of the Rock Hudson Doris Day getaway. And it's Wanda and the Jamie-Gillis character, and they are out in the country and having this wonderful time. And meanwhile, Ron Jeremy is back in the office and investigating what's going on, and finally finds out that it is Wanda behind this shell company. And then he hurries up and rushes out to this cottage in the wilderness in order to let Jamie-Gillis know, like, the woman that you're sleeping with is the woman that we've been investigating this whole time. She's the one who's behind this, and, we've got to stop it. And then you think, okay, things are going to change, and we're going to have this confrontation, and there's this whole thing with a drink that has a Mickey in it, and there's a Ron Jeremy getting hit over the head with a bottle, which was fantastic. That's like 2 movies in within 2 weeks that I've had women hitting men over the heads with bottles. Last time was in They Live, but here it is with Ron Jeremy getting knocked over the head. And it's like, okay, great. These guys are taken care of. Wanda is going to win, and everything is going to be A-okay. And that's where the movie should end. Yeah,
completely, because tonally, the twist ending where, the bad guys win, that actually threw me off. And I'm usually someone who likes a good, ooh, okay, that's cool. But this film is tonally so light that it felt like, what? Like, it It felt very strange to me. And even though I feel like they were still kind of trying to pull it off as like, because they have like her Mookie confidant guy, whatever, come in and be like, oh, even though I lost all this money, the kid's still got a lot of spunk in her or something like that. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make me feel better. Like, like that's sad. Yeah, I would say my only real two complaints would be that ending, and also actually some of the music, not counting the People's Court.
I mean, not only does the film defeat our heroine, but it drives the point home when, after we see Lou, the Jamie-Gillis character, take patriarchal control at the head of the conference table in the city, in the Tyler Investments, which is now Perrini Investments, we go back to the country house in Connecticut, and we see Janie and Wanda continuing to celebrate, not knowing yet that they have been had. So it doesn't just pull the rug out from under them at the end. We revisit them and anticipate their humiliation that we never get to see. It's a real twist of the knife, I think.
Well, it's just weird, too, that we have this almost like Sleeping Beauty type of thing where we do go back to the company and it's been renamed Perrini, and you would assume that it's not being renamed Perrini like the next day. You're assuming that a lot of time has passed for him to perform these machinations, to take over the company, to get the name changed, to get in there, and he's having just a workaday day at his new company. And then it's like, yeah, cut back to poor Wanda, and it's kind of the next morning, but then at the same time, you're like, wait a second, how much time has passed? So it's just this weird temporal shift that happens at the end of the film, as if she had been sleeping for weeks instead of just overnight, celebrating because she and her assistant, broke out the champagne and they are, chugging it down. But yeah, it's as if she has been sleeping now for weeks and finally waking up.
And this is a character who has had such rigorous self-control and presence of mind, and could always think 2 or 3 steps ahead of anyone who could conceivably challenge her. The Old Testament, one of the books of the Old Testament says, do not go to sleep among your enemies, and so they just get drunk with those guys still in the house. It really undercuts much of what we have seen before.
Perrini kept the company's fantastic tagline, which is "Trust us" in quotation marks. Yes. I got a good chuckle out of that when I first saw that. I was like, oh, that's cute. So there are little things planted to kind of show the audience, like, yeah, this is not a pretty world. Like, we're going to be funny about it and light about it, but this is a world just riddled with corruption and bullshit and false morals. If you look at the film like that, the ending in some ways is probably maybe realistic. It's like, it's almost like she gets punished for like being human for one moment, because, as you've said, like, throughout the whole film, she's very controlled, and the only sex you really see her have that seems, like she's actually probably enjoying it for real is with Jamie, is with the Perrini character, because everything else is just kind of, it's, she plays it very light, and, it's Veronica. She's fantastic. But I mean, it's a means to an end. She almost seems relieved when the guys, are not the most long-lasting fellas. Yes. But so it's almost like, the one time she's human, and was it the smartest move to celebrate and get drunk while the guys are still passed out? Absolutely not. But it's a human move. Humans make mistakes. You get especially moments of just like, oh my God, I finally have achieved this. You're going to want to have champagne. So it's almost like her one moment of humanity and just getting to let her hair down. It's like, well, you had a heart and you almost get punished for it. That, there's no room for that in this world. I mean, which I don't know if that's what they mean. I think you could take that from it. It just to me, it's so weird because the film is, I think that's what threw me off was the tonality. Right. There are films that can pull off that kind of cynicism very well, which is, like if it was a Cecil Howard film, like Cecil's absolutely master of pulling in the dark twist, but his films are, for the most part, tonality, just so I have that feeling of just, of multi-layers and the dark and sadness of the human condition. That's not Wanda Whips Wall Street. Right. So I thought it was curious.
And it even goes against the name of the film. Of course, there's no whipping in the film, no literal whipping, which was somewhat a disappointment. But that she doesn't whip Wall Street. The Wall Street ends up whipping her at the end of the day. And it's just like, oh, man, that kind of goes against what you were selling me here, which was that this woman is going to be triumphant. She's been so smart and so great through this whole thing. And that Perrini wins at the end of the day. And it's not like their relationship. You talked about the sex between those two characters. And I agree that seems to be the moment where she's having the most fun. But I still think that she has an agenda and he's got an agenda, and then his agenda is the one that wins out.
I guess here's where I want to point out what I thought when I first saw the trailer to the film, and that was that after the masterpiece that was Caligula, I saw the trailer and I thought that it was a film adaptation of the comic strip Oh Wicked Wanda, which had appeared in Penthouse from 1973 to 1980. And so I imagined that the Veronica Hart character was going to, be this sort of master sexual manipulator, and that the whole movie seems to be moving toward a final shot where Wanda is sitting at the head of that conference table. There's nothing in the trailer, there's nothing in the first hour and 20 minutes of the film that just seems to be where we're headed. Remember the last shot from Written on the Wind, right, where the daughter inherits the company and she sort of sucks on that big oil derrick paperweight on the desk at the end of the movie. It just seems like that's where we're headed, and then to have that sort of switch at the end was really, as you say, it's sort of tonally bizarre. And this has been bugging me for days, so the only thing I can come up with to try to explain this is that there might be two conflicting regimes of satire in this movie. The corruption of the financial sector, that the most ruthless and unprincipled person wins. And remember, he's a sort of Lou is a sort of investigator, law enforcement, new sheriff in town. We're going to find out the source of all of this, corruption and everything. And of course, he turns the system to his own benefit. And that's certainly part of the cynicism or skepticism or satire at the base of the film. So we could look at that as sort of one regime of satire. And it's sort of in conflict with one of the central regimes of satire that's characteristic of pornography, and that's this idea that the world is controlled by the power of the pussy, and that men can erect, if you'll pardon the expression, men can erect all of these institutions and all of these zones of pleasure and privilege and moral corruption, selfishness, and they seem completely bulletproof to the slings and arrows of the outside world. But then when a powerful sexual woman enters that realm, all of those institutions that have made this male unassailable and invulnerable, they just completely collapse and implode. And so at the end of the movie, sort of which group of things that they're making fun of, which of those things is going to win out, which regime of satire is going to actually come out on top. And they chose the cynical, corrupt, irredeemable institutional satire mode, as opposed to the men are weak, that men are less resourceful than women, men are less able to think on their feet than women. Men don't fully understand the consequences of what they're doing, maybe 2 or 3 steps down the line. And we could name like dozens of porn films that portray the male characters in this way, that the women are always more intelligent, always more resourceful, always more active. And the men are just kind of helpless in this onslaught of Amazonian intellectual and physical superiority that the women evince. And this movie just chooses to take the other tack. It's really quite striking.
It bums me out, man.
Mike, it's like you see into my soul, sir. It is strangely a downer, but I agree with everything you were speaking to, Kevin. And it's, yeah, I mean, because I know I've seen people refer to online as this film as being like a great kind of feminist film. And in a way, I agree with that, but it's definitely not a great feminist film in the sense of like making you feel rah-rah about life or the world we live in. But I respect that. I mean, I didn't care for the ending because I don't think it fit in with the rest of the film, but I respect anybody that takes a chance. I mean, they had to know that wouldn't be a popular move, Yes. I mean, everybody involved in this film Larry Revene's one of the best, not only in the genre, but I mean, he's made films. Like I would argue Raw Talent's not just a great adult film. It's just a great film. It's just a great, great, great film. So yeah, I mean, I respect anybody, even if it doesn't hit me well, if you make a decision that it's not going to be popular, but you're sticking to it, good for you. You got to do what you got to do. It's your art.
One of the real selling points of the Blu-ray and the audio commentary with Veronica Hart and Larry Revene is their back and forth at the end of the film about the resolution of the plot. It's I don't want to give away any spoilers because Distripix really deserves our support for the great, great work they did with this film and many, many others. But I got to tell you, that's one of the funniest bits on the commentary when they sort of lock horns, if you will, on the ending of the film. It's really worth a listen.
All right, we're going to take a break and play an interview with the director of Wanda Whips Wall Street, Mr. Larry Revene. I also wanted to let folks know that we have an interview with the writer of Wanda Whips Wall Street, Mr. Rick Marks. That is over at the website, projection-booth.com, where you can read that interview. I know it doesn't make for the best podcasting in the world, but there is a readable interview with him at projection-booth.com. So be sure to head on over, check that out. And we will, of course, have a link to it from this episode of the Projection Booth as well, so you can maybe read it while you are listening or listen while you're reading. One of the two. Take your choice.
We asked the man on the street what he thought about the After Movie Diner website and podcast, but sadly he had never heard of either and was on his way to the doctor's to have a mole removed. Or it could have been a badger. He wasn't sure. It felt bigger than a mole. Also, he wasn't sure how it got up there in the first place. Anyway, we asked all the famous people, like Michael Ironside, Fred the Hammer Williamson, Ted Raimi, Barbara Crampton, Cynthia Rothrock, and so on, that they've interviewed over there on the After Movie Diner website and podcast, what they thought about the After Movie Diner website and podcast. But most of them said that if we quoted them, we would be hearing from their comical southern lawyers complete with bow tie, meat gut, and brow mopping handkerchief. So instead, we say who cares what anyone thinks of you After Movie Diner website and podcast. You are awesome just the way you are, so don't you go changing. If you want to see for yourself, go to aftermoviediner.com or find the After Movie Diner podcast on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are found. The After Movie Diner, doing it their own way since 2011.
Tuning into Sci-Fi TV. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Brent Barrett.
I'm Kevin Batchelder.
I'm Wendy Hembrock.
The Viewer's Guide to Genre Television.
Welcome everyone to a special supernatural-focused bonus
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fae Files,
a family of podcasts for the genre-loving television viewer.
Welcome to Saturday B Movie Reel.
Hi everyone, welcome to the study group.
Welcome to the top genre characters of all time countdown.
And tonight we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones Season 3.
Find us at tuningintoscifitv.com.
This is Adam Spiegelman from the Cult Movie Podcast, Proudly Resents. And you're listening to my favorite movie podcast, The Projection Booth. I know. It's messed up, right?
Where were you at your career at the time that Wanda Whips Wall Street was made?
You know, I'd been in motion pictures, making films, shooting films and stuff for about, 15 years already. And I'd worked with Chuck Vincent and did several films with him in the late 70s, early 80s. And for him, I directed Sizzle and Fascination, which both did well. My camera assistant, who been with me for a couple of years had a frat frat boys that had friends on Wall Street, and they pitched the Wall Street guys about doing a film based on Wall Street. This is during the era when leverage buyouts were new, and it was a whole new, the leverage takeovers and all of that stuff was going on. So the Wall Street guys decided they wanted to go ahead with it. So my camera assistant, the reason that they asked me was because at that particular point, of course, I was shooting films for Chuck Vincent and had my own features out under Chuck's auspices, but I was, had a higher profile at that point, so I was a good bet as far as the Wall Street people go, as far as like getting a return on their money. And also with the inclusion of Veronica Hart as the leading person, it looked like a good bet for them. So we went ahead and did the film with their financing.
Now, I had heard that you shot this, and correct me if I'm wrong, 5 days, $100,000. Is that pretty much in the ballpark?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't remember exactly the days on it, but that would have been about the schedule that we worked on in those days. We averaged, an average script is about 110 pages, and we would average, 10 pages a day, and even, but because of the sex, there would be less pages and more film run through the camera as a result, because the sex scenes normally, that's one of the interesting things about that people don't latch on to too much about the fact that X-rated films, aside from having a built-in audience, are some of the most inexpensive films to make, because you can shoot, if the people are professional and you can shoot a sex scene in a half an hour. I even got an award once for a sex scene I did in 11 minutes with 4 people, and so that's what led to the prominence of the X-rated features at that point, and also because in the late 70s, when the Supreme Court put the ball back in the local courts, so to speak, businessmen came in, so it was a good business venture. That's why the Wall Street guys were primed to do that.
Here's kind of a maybe a silly and hopefully not too pedantic question, but when you are shooting an adult film, I don't imagine that you save all the sex scenes till the end, because obviously everyone would be really super tired. Do you kind of split it out and say, okay, on Monday we're doing this scene for the sex, on Tuesdays this one, and just kind of schedule things around people so that they're not just exhausted when it comes to almost having too much sex?
Yes, in a general sense, the idea, generally what would happen would be that we would shoot the sex scene in the sequence of the dialogue, mainly because, the whole idea of trying to repeat the set, the lighting, the costumes, and all that stuff, it was more expeditious to shoot as you went. And since we, were doing dialogue on these things, they didn't, the sex scene, like I said, might only last half an hour, and the heavy lifting, excuse the expression, was really on the guys, not so much the girls. And so we shot them in sequence. The thing that wore people down more than the actual having the physical contact and performing was the fact that we had to do a soft version too. So we'd actually have to shoot the hard scene first and then go back and shoot the soft scene. So that took more out of people than the actual physical sex scene. It's like repeating it again. We'd only do maybe 2 or 3 sex scenes a day, and they'd always be with different people. So that there wasn't much of a burden on them.
Now, your screenwriter on this one, Rick Marks, when had you met him?
I met Rick through Chuck Vincent. Rick was Chuck's writer at the time that we did Wanda, and he was writing all of Chuck Vincent's films. And Rick, I must say, was a good part of why the deal went through. Besides, my having some credibility, and Veronica Hart being, she was relatively new at that point. But Rick really had the writing credentials, because he had done so much with Chuck. He'd done a lot of for other people. He was writing for everybody in town here at one point.
Yeah, it seems like in the early 80s he had so many credits, and then also kind of showing up a few times as an actor here and there.
Yeah, he was. He played one of the gang members in I believe it was in Roommates. Yeah, in Roommates. He was in that scene with gang members. But he, prolific writer, really just could really, take a concept and formalize it. And he worked very close with the Wall Street guys, because all the intricacies of the leverage buyout and that sort of thing he had to get briefed by that. So he went to, he actually did sessions with the Wall Street guys to get those details straight.
Yeah, you kind of predated Oliver Stone by a few years here.
Yeah. He hasn't spoken to me since.
What was it like working with Jamie-Gillis?
I knew Jamie from the Loop days back in the early 70s when I first started out. Jamie was working, and Jamie was a personality that sort of commanded respect, in as much as that he was a very New York guy, and he was very hip, if I can use that term, in terms of his social abilities. But as far as working with him, he was great. He was a consummate performer, professional, and he knew his lines. He really was into the acting. So, but he could also the sex scenes. He was not adverse to those either. But he was very good to work with. You knew that when you went on the set and Jamie was working, you knew that there wouldn't be any problem in that department, that he'd come equipped and he'd deliver.
I also want to ask you, how was working with Ron Jeremy?
Well, I knew Ron from his first forays into X, and as a matter of fact, my film Sizzle was his first speaking part, and then based on his performance in that, we did Fascination right after that, and that was his first leading role. Ron was and still is a character. It's difficult to get him to just listen, but as far as coming through, surprisingly, he's a consummate actor, and as far as the sex performances go, Ronnie was one of the few guys that could perform 2 or 3 scenes in a day, and we had I would be shooting the sex with him, and I get down, I'd have 100 feet of 35 millimeter film left in the magazine, and I'd say, okay, Ronnie, at the end of I'd say, let's do the money shot, and he says, okay, and he says, watch me, and then he would, he'd go into action, and he'd say, okay, 10, and I'd go 10, 9, 8, and invariably, when I got to 1, he'd deliver. It was amazing. I mean, Ron is an amazing physical guy,
There's such a great amount of humor in Wanda Whips Wall Street that is just, it really reminds me of kind of a screwball comedy of old.
Yeah, that's good, Mike. I like that. Yeah, well, you know, the casting, it's all about the casting. And you give them the lines and they play them. I mean, that one scene in Wanda when Veronica is trying to get on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and she gets the guy into the closet and does the scene with him in the closet, gets him to take his clothes off. I mean, that I had no idea how well Veronica would play that scene. I mean, she just, you know, and plays to the camera. She really knew the screencraft. It was like in her DNA. And that one little section there where she's got his eyes closed, he's sitting up on some boxes, and she's putting on his clothes so she can, and she sort of turns to, she's working towards the camera, and she says, and I'm going to something right up the crack of your ass. I mean, it was so perfectly timed that whole scene almost played as one shot.
She is always so good, but she carries the film. It is amazing. And this was, what did you say, this was one of her first features?
Yes, it was. I just met Veronica maybe 2 years before, a year before. She was new in New York. She caught on like wildfire, understandably, with her talent and looks and abilities. I mean, not every woman in the X could, you know, do 3 sex scenes in a day and do 10 pages of dialogue and do 6 scene changes and costume changes and never miss a beat. She was always on time, always delivered, always.
In recent years, there have been screenings of Wanda Whips Wall Street, especially around when it was being restored. What was it like seeing it with an audience again after so many years?
That was such a treat because, you know, when in the mid '80s, when video and cable took over the theatrical X films, it was a great loss. We didn't have the premiere screening in a theater anymore. I mean, we did with Wanda, but after that, you know, it went straight to video, and that was it. There was no, you know, kind of finalization. You know, you get to go into the room with all the people, everybody looks at it, you look for the. So seeing it again was a deja vu in terms of like really watching the audience and appreciating what it was that they were seeing, because the irony of watching a film that you've made is that people will laugh at something. You've seen it thousands of times while you're editing. People will laugh at something that you don't understand while they're laughing, and they'll not laugh at things that you knew were a guaranteed side splitter. It's just one of the most exciting things to watch an audience viewing your film, because you never know. You know, it's the same film. It's a different audience, and they respond differently. So I was really happy to do that. Was a high point watching that again, and of course having Veronica there and Rick Marks there and all the people. It was really quite something, especially since when we made those films, they were for theatrical, and they, you know, we generally thought that they'd have the shelf life of sushi. And we were happy, you know, to be looking at that film 30, 35 years later was just amazing. It certainly made a big impression on me. It's like, be careful of what you do, you know. It's like the internet, you know, don't post that Facebook thing. You think twice about it, you know. Yeah, that was great. That was really great. A lot of new faces, new people reaction, and a lot of the old people. It was just great to see them, you know, see their old friends and stuff up on the screen.
The context of the movie has definitely changed over 30-some years since it's been out. Just the when you talk about the jokes hitting or not hitting, I know for me watching it, the one thing that was absolutely hysterical that was not intended to be was the use of the same library music that the People's Court used.
Oh, yeah, we preceded them. When I was doing Wanda during that period in the 80s, they charged, you would use canned music. And you go to the library. Actually, I had a studio on 45th Street at that time, and right across the street was Valentino's library of music. And you go in, and there were records, and they would charge you $75 a needle drop, and that was for one cut off of a song, and then or a tune, whatever, and then you had to have that transferred to 35 millimeter sprocketed full coat magnetic tape. So it was expensive, and it got to the point they were going up and up. It got to the point that it was actually cheaper to produce the music than to buy canned music. But as far as why that music got used was, you can imagine with hundreds of records, when you start narrowing it down and looking for something that was during that period that was sort of current music-wise, you were limited to maybe one or two albums that were possibly, useful. And you'll notice that Radley Metzger used some of the same music in his films. So I don't know if the People's Court got the association, for their music from the porn films, but it was very kind of limiting. That was one aspect of it that I didn't like, because you were really kind of stuck with whatever comes out of the can.
Do you still hear some of the music that you used all those years ago pop up in odd places?
Yeah, occasionally I will hear something, but more than that, it's the that style of music. It was, it was kind of a spin-off from the James Bond type music, and there were a lot of, those tracks are basically just cliches, in themselves, all put together. I will hear a little refrain or something, it'll get that little flashback like you do when you hear a song that was popular in your high school years or something. So yeah, I wasn't really crazy about that music at all, but that's what we were stuck with.
Yeah, the name of the movie is Wanda Whips Wall Street, and at the end of the day, she doesn't really whip Wall Street. Was there ever any consternation about the way that she loses at the end of the day and almost the bad guys win at the end of the film?
You put into the context of the time that, this was the early 80s, with the expression glass ceiling hadn't even been introduced at that point. And the idea of a woman wiling her ways and getting inside and creating havoc within those Wall Street walls was enough. And they popped that champagne bottle at the end, she and her cohort. And in a way, it is a triumph for them, because they did manage to, they lost the fight, but they won the battle.
I want to know if you happen to know who Arthur Greenstans is.
Was he the guy that played the character that she always confers with? Is that who you're speaking of?
I'm getting the name Arthur Greenstans from the film Stocks and Blondes.
Oh, okay. All right. So, as I mentioned, my camera assistant and his buddy were the ones that got the Wall Street guys going, and to put the money in. And after we did the Wanda film, they originally went, the Wall Street guys, they originally went with Chuck Vincent as a distributor. And Chuck was coming out at about the same time with Roommates. What he did was he put Wanda as the second billing in a two billing with Roommates, and effectively what that does is it means he has his own film, which he's getting the profits. Wanda, which he's only distributing, he gets more profit because it's running with his film, so he's cleaning it up on both ends that way. And what happened was the Wall Street guys figured out real quick what was going on, and they took the film away from him. At that point, there was some uneasy feelings with the guys that I was dealing with, and they wanted to go on and do an R-rated version. So Stocks and Blondes was the R-rated version of Wanda, and I had absolutely no involvement in that at all, so that was Arthur Greenberg. I don't know who that is referring to. Was it like in the production, in the producers or something?
He's listed as the new director of the film.
Oh, I know who it is. Okay. He was, that was his first film. That was his last film. He was a gaffer. He had been my gaffer on a couple of films, and the two guys, my camera assistant, they were all friends and stuff, so they got him to direct.
You talked about the whole idea of shooting the hardcore version and then shooting the softer version. Did they release the R-rated versions more widely and then the X-rated versions just to specific markets?
The system that we used in those days, Mike, was that we would the complication was to make other prints, to make a whole new negative and so forth for the soft version. And soft was really stepchild. I mean, there might only be, let's say if you had 20 prints, maybe only about 4 of them would be soft versions, and they would play in places that had legal constraints. But what we did was we would shoot the film as an X-rated film, and then we would go back. We'd shoot the softcore based on the scene that we had just done, the hardcore scene, position-wise and so forth. And then in the editing, we would cut the soft scene frame. The section, the whole sex scene, frame to frame. In other words, where the hardcore started, the softcore would cut in there, and where the hardcore ended, the softcore would end. The reason for that was that we'd cut the film with an X-rated version first. Then go back after the film was already mixed and completed. We go back and use the film and cut the softcore to the X print so that it came out exactly frame to frame and then that way. The music. See, the problem was that if you have to construct a whole new soundtrack for that type of thing. So consequently, what we could do was take and just cut the actual release prints, cut in these modules of the soft core, and they would have the same music track. In other words, we'd make up. I remember we'd make up like an average X-rated film would have maybe 7 sex scenes in it, and so we'd make up a reel of 7 softcore scenes, and have it printed with the same music from the X-rated version, and then they would physically cut the release prints and insert that. Cut out the X and just insert this little module into the actual release print. It was economics all the way. there was a lot of stuff like that. For instance, like we never edited in 35, we always edited in 16 because you save thousands of dollars just on the work prints. And then, they would do a reduction print, would edit in 16, and then the negative matcher would be the one that would, correspond the 35 millimeter to the 16 millimeter print. That's how the films got made, but you save thousands that way. There were a bunch of little, price saving things that we did. For instance, we always used Israeli slates, what they call Israeli slates. When they put the slate up in front of the camera, when we're going to start a scene, the clap sticks, we would use first thing we'd do is we used consecutive numbers on the sound takes. It started at 1, went all the way through to the last sound take. That way there was no confusion. Most people can't wrap their head around that. That's easier than having scene 36, take 22, and the sound would be, that same number. It just made it easier. The other thing was that, and this got really crazy with Chuck Vincent and Bill Slobodian, his AD. We do the Israeli slates, and the normal procedure is they say, to begin a tape, to begin a scene or a shot, you say, roll sound. The sound man says speed. The cameraman will say mark it, and the slate is made right there. And the marking would come as quick to mark it as possible to save frames, feet. You could, if you're shooting 40,000 feet of film, and you use 5 feet for every slate, you wind up with like 4,000 feet of slates at the end of the editing process. So we would do this and be very quick. It was a roll sound, speed, mark it, click, boom, action. So it was like all of these cost-saving factors were part of what was used to save money, and that's why those films got done at the ridiculously low amount of money that they were done. But I think Wanda, to make a correction, I think Wanda was $250. I think they had $250,000 for that. I'm not sure. Don't quote me. I think it was a little more than $100,000.
If a movie's taking, say, 5 days to shoot, how long does it take to edit and mix and do all the other things before it's ready to actually go out into the market?
Okay, I shot Wanda, and we started editing right away. It takes roughly about 3 months. And that's whenever I would edit a film like that, it was almost like when you finish it, it's like getting out of stir. It's like you walk out and see the sunshine for the first time in days, weeks or months. And so it took about 3 months, maybe. Then it's in the hands of the lab. And the labs were pretty efficient, so they, would get turnarounds on all that stuff. But it would take 5 days it would take the equivalent of what it took to shoot the film to mix the film, to do the sound mix on it, because that was such a slow and tedious process, inching your way through the film.
It sounds like you shot most of the sex scenes without sound, probably for savings, and then also so you kind of control the atmosphere a little bit more. Is that true?
Yes, that's true, Mike. The sex scenes generally were shot without sound, and that was another thing I didn't really particularly care for. But to actually see a cameraman can go in, let's say in a room with 2 people and shoot a sex scene in, half an hour, depending on the guy. But if you had to bring in the boom man, the sound man, use a blimped camera, the sex scenes were always shot with the Arri 2C, which is a non-blimped camera. It means when you turn that camera on, it's it's like a noisy thing, but you could work fast that way. And that was in deference mainly to the actors. A lot of that had to do with the actors because, just having so many people having to make slates, just making slates to do the slate, to sync the sound for something like that. And it wasn't always guaranteed that they were really good at making audible sounds, so we could do that later, which always showed. I mean, that's the one thing I always have to laugh at, because I remember being in the booth once with it was Wanda. It was doing Wanda. My editing assistant and myself were in the booth, and she and I were making the moans and groans, and my old lady walked in into the studio. So it was funny, funny. You try not to overdo it, and they'd unspool on the desk in the bongo booth where you do the sound. They would unspool a roll of magnetic tape on the table, and you kind of swish that around to do Foley's for the sheets and the covers and stuff while you're doing the moans and groans. But generally, it was too, it became like cliche sounding, those sounds and everything. So it was not, it would have been nicer to, but the reason we did those films on 5 days was because, we were cranking. I mean, if it took more than an hour to shoot a sex scene, it was a problem.
I'm curious, are you working on another volume of your memoir?
Yes, I have the 2 out, and I have the 3rd written. I haven't been able to really address myself to it time-wise, because I've moved several times in the last year. Right now, I'm working very hard in Hudson, New York, and I have a studio over in Athens. And I have a big, it's the old PT boat factory. I have a person I'm working with, we sell bars. So we bring the bars in and we set them up and I photograph them and we sell them. And it's really an extension, of the film thing, because I'm dressing sets. Doing sets, and I will use them actually to do. So I'm working on a film now, and it's nice to have the luxury of having a whole huge studio to work in.
What film are you working on these days?
I haven't done any X stuff since the 80s, and that was mainly because my daughter was born in 82, and my ex and I, talked it over and thought, well, when she gets to be grade school age, it might be awkward for her. What's your daddy do? I stepped in that, but I have two. I have one film that's in making the rounds with the film festivals, and another film I just have to find a bass player to finish that. But I'm working on another film based on manipulating a timeline, using a train back and forth in terms of time in a situation with somebody in a room or a couple of people in a room type of thing. So that's where, it's so much easier now, Mike, with the digital. Come on. It's unbelievable. I show up with a little bag and shoot video. With film, I'd show up with a truck, and 4 guys to move the stuff, and it's quite different. So it's very immediate. I love it. I'm doing great with doing the editing, doing all your editing and all your effects and music and mixing and everything right at your laptop. It's great.
I know when we talked the very first time, we talked about raw talent, and that was kind of on that cusp of film going into video, and you talked about how much it took to get video to look good, especially I think you were talking to the second and third Raw Talents, how that was to struggle to get video to look good. Does digital give you an image that you're happy with?
Yes. And Mike, I knew it the moment that they introduced the Red camera. You're familiar with the Red, I'm sure. When that, I was number 1,200 serial numbers to buy that camera before they even built it. I saw the writing on the wall, and digital was the solution. Video was, I didn't like video, and I didn't like people that did. And, it just always fell short of expectations. It never raised. But digital, man, it's there. It's beyond. I mean, film is 1,500 lens resolution. And, digital is whatever, 3,000 or whatever you make it. So, yeah, it's much better. It's much better. And the way, I mean, it's immediate now. The people that could not afford to make films in 1980, they can do it now. And whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's like giving everybody a ballpoint pen and saying, okay, write. Everybody has the possibility of making films. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the way films are structured and so forth as a result of that. It's out of the hands of the format, the Hollywood format, so to speak.
When we last talked, I can't remember if you were just starting or if you had just finished a road trip. Can I ask you a little bit about how that went?
Yes, that must have been the one with Gerard Damiano. Yeah, it was, like I said, it was interesting. It was interesting to see a lot of people that I have worked with early in the 70s, not late 70s, early. Sharon Mitchell. I worked with her when she was, when I was down on 14th Street with Bob Wolf and doing the loops in the basement. Jamie-Gillis, of course he was gone by that point. So, but, Rob Everett was one who also had worked down there, and I saw him out in California, and he's had a tough time, but he's such a gentleman and just such a inspiring person. He has a son who is challenged, mentally challenged, and Rob spends his life taking care of that kid now. So. It was nice seeing him and Sharon Mitchell and Joao Fernandez and Annie Sprinkle and Ron Jeremy and some people that I had sort of forgotten about, but Annette Hines was on the agenda. We stopped and interviewed her. So it was in a way, it was a kind of, I always think of like people in terms of like, you meet people in intersecting art, and then there are other people that are like a circle. You meet them, you know them, you see them 10 years later, and it's still, they're still, welcome in your ability to like people, you like those people. And that's what was interesting for me. But, I did all the driving. It was 10,000 miles. So, it was quite a trip in terms of like just, burning rubber on the interstate all over the country.
What was the purpose? Is that going to be turned into a documentary or?
Yes. Gerard is, I don't know what he's done on it, at this point. That was summer before last. Gerard is cutting that together, and he's also, what the thrust of it were people that worked with his father, Jerry Damiano. And he actually, which was very good. He took clips, he took scenes that people who we were interviewing, and he played them, and the people talked about, like the director's voiceover that they do on the DVDs and stuff. People talked about the film, what they remembered about Jerry, what they remembered about the scene, and that type of thing. So he is going to eventually put all of that together into a film. And like I said, I don't know where he is in terms of the finishing it, but we shot about 2,000 people for that film.
So it sounds like everything's going pretty good with you.
Yeah, Mike, I'm a big believer in Providence, and the thing is that I went through kind of a big change. I had to leave New York. My landlady's son got a girlfriend, so I lost my apartment. But I have been busier than hell, and I'm involved in all kinds of things here in Hudson, besides my, finishing my third book and working on the films that I've got going now. I'm helping design bicycles. I'm helping sell these bars. I'm being. I was starting. We have several venues here that I have control over. That starts playing some music again and showing films and different things. So there's a lot going on, and I'm really looking forward to. By the end of the summer, some of these things shall have come to fruition. I just finished doing a project for on Houston Street. The guy I work with owned a property on Houston Street, and it was right next door to where Nikola Tesla had his laboratory, and also Kepler, Joseph Kepler, who started Puck magazine, and Teddy Roosevelt, and Mark Twain. They were all like, we call it the Mulberry Street Gang. It's the name of the project, and so we'll be starting a documentary on that. And so I got a bunch of things going on. Some things I never thought I'd ever be involved with, I'm doing now, so that's great. It's like learning plumbing instead of having to marry one. So yeah, we're doing well.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about Wanda Whips Wall Street. Now, one of the phenomenons that we have talked about in this podcast before is the whole idea of taking a movie like this, cutting out some of the more hardcore sex, maybe shooting some new inserts, and repackaging it as a new movie. And Wanda Whips Wall Street was one of those, I don't know if a victim is the right word, or one of those subjects, let's say. There was a movie that came out in 1984, so about 3 years after this movie came out, called Stocks and Blondes. And it is a reworking of Wanda Whips Wall Street. A severe reworking. I was very surprised at just how much new stuff was shot for this particular film. It was directed, or I guess redirected, by a guy going by the name of Arthur Greenstands. And that, Kevin, is where our Willingquim character comes from. It is Leigh Wood, who plays Wendy Willingquim, who is the member of a sorority, I Felt a Thigh, and she is investigating the case of this woman, Wanda, who was trying to take over this company a few years prior. She's in college. She's going through and investigating.
Let me take you back in time to my days as a carefree co-ed at New York Business University, where fate led me to Wanda, one shrewd lady who knew how to use her assets.
And so you actually get reshoots with these characters. At one point, she goes in to see Ron Jeremy, who is working at a place called Schmada's down in the garment district, and she goes in there and interviews him, and he gives his thoughts. She meets up with Wanda herself, with Veronica Hart. And then this movie, it's interesting because they reshoot all of those scenes with the mook that we're talking about. Every time Wanda picks up the phone and calls her guy, her broker guy, it's a different actor.
Art, yeah, I'm in. I got a job with Tyler Securities, and you know how big they are.
Beautiful, baby. Fantastic. You know, you're a real pro.
Tyler will be all mine. Just like Wanko is now.
I want you to concentrate on acquiring those shares, establish your position, and let me handle the paperwork. Boom, boom, boom. From Tyler one day to your dummy corporation the next. I've had it chartered as LaBelle Brothers.
Art, I am not a brother.
But you are LaBelle. It'll provide you with complete anonymity for our, shall we say, slightly shady deals.
Slightly shady? Why don't you lawyers ever call a spade a spade? Art, I stole Wanko, and I intend on stealing Tyler as well. I got a job with Tyler Securities, and you know how big they are.
Beautiful, baby. Fantastic.
Will be all mine. Just like Wanko is now.
I want you to concentrate on acquiring those shares. You know, establish your position. You know, you handle the calisthenics and let me handle the paperwork. Boom, from Tyler one day to your dummy corporation the next. Yeah, I've had it chartered as LaBelle Brothers.
Art, I am not a brother.
It's the perfect cover for our, let's say, slightly shady little deals.
Slightly shady? Why don't you lawyers ever call a spade a spade? Art, I stole Wanko, and I intend on stealing Tyler as well.
Great, great.
So they recast kind of like what those conversations are, which is interesting. And then they actually switch up the ending. So if you want the happy ending, you can, if you want the happy ending, it's $100 extra. If you want the happy ending, you can watch Stocks and Blondes, and we don't have jamie-gillis and Ron Jeremy getting up and going into the city and starting Perrini Brothers or Perrini Company. We have Wanda successful at the end of the day. We get a little bit extra at the end as far as like somebody's trying to stop Wendy Willing-Quinn from writing her paper and exposing the truth. But it's amazing just how much new stuff there is. It doesn't even start with Wanda coming out of Wanko at the beginning of the film until about 10 minutes in. And there are moments of Wendy Willing-Quinn that go throughout this film. I mean, there are large chunks. So it's not just, a slight trim here and there of removing the sex scenes. So it's remarkable as far as how much they repackage this film.
Citizen Wanda, in other words.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Luckily, Wanda isn't dead at the beginning, and we don't cut to news on the march. But yeah, it's pretty much, how did this woman become as successful as she is?
Insert Rosebud joke here.
That's still more subtle than what was that sorority name? Was it?
I felt a die.
Jesus, that's God. Porky's had more subtlety than that.
Hey, Porky's is a great film.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just making a subtlety joke here. But
yep.
I read one of the articles. I haven't seen this film, but I did read the articles you linked to, Mike, and particularly Casey Scott's review, which was really good and detailed. Casey does great work, so no shock there. But it mentioned that the Tish Ambrose character Janie is real bitter, and she's like a stripper. Is that?
Yeah. They go to her within just a few minutes, and I'm just like, why are they at this strip club? And that's where they bring her in.
Oh God, that's so sad. Poor Janie.
It is.
This is for school.
Give me a break.
Oh, that's a Brandt takeover.
That bitch.
Who, Wanda Brandt?
No. Nancy Reagan. Who else?
But I thought you two used to be good friends.
Used to be.
Yeah, I can't say it's all peaches and cream, but at least Wanda is successful. At least she's sitting there at the head of the table at Brandt Enterprises at the end of the film.
And so they bring Veronica back to shoot new scenes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, they've brought her back. They brought Ron Jeremy back. I don't think that they brought Jamie-Gillis back, but yeah, they at least brought those guys back, which was just amazing to see. And to see, Ron, his physical transformation within just a few years, he's got that Isro starting to grow out pretty good, because his hair is pretty under control at the beginning of or throughout Wanda Whips Wall Street, but he's starting to get hedgehog qualities as we move into this.
The hedgehog qualities that needs to go in an article. If any one of us, the three of us, next time we write about a film with Ron Jeremy, which I'm sure will happen, hedgehog qualities. Yeah.
Hedgehog qualities. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that really astonishes me about this movie is Veronica's acting is breathtaking throughout. And this is particularly unbelievable when we learn that Larry-Revene did not have time to do rehearsals for the film, that Chuck Vincent, whose own films he was producing, and so it was kind of his candy store. They would have read-throughs before the shoot, before the crew was assembled and all this other stuff. And Veronica Hart, in an interview, said that all they did for this film was run their lines during makeup, and that the whole great sex scene in the car between Ron Jeremy and Tish Ambrose, all that comic dialogue is completely improvised. And Veronica, throughout the movie, is not only acting, not only is Jane Hamilton playing Veronica Hart, the porn star who's playing Wanda, which is a fascinating, layered thing in and of itself, but she's also acting and manipulating the people around her. And so she has to let us know that what she is doing is dishonest and manipulative, but it's going over the heads of the people around her. So she has to add that extra layer of knowingness or something to the performance. And once again, not only is she good at Wanda, but she's good showing Wanda adroitly in some cases and with difficulty in other cases, stepping in and out of these roles. And one of the real comic master strokes of the film is after she's conned the stockbroker in the broom closet to put on his to take off his clothes, and then she puts the clothes on. There's this shot where she comes out and she awkwardly but assertively adjusts his clothes on her body. She adjusts the coat, she adjusts the hat, and she adjusts the glasses. She takes off her earrings, and we see her. She changes from the Wanda gate to the Martin gate, and it's just this wonderfully disciplined moment of physical comedy. And I just can't think of anyone else in the business at the time, except maybe Annette Haven or Leslie Beauvais, who could really do that kind of thing. I mean, her performance is multi-layered, and that is, of course, against the set of norms of acting in the linking scenes that we associate with female porn actors. And so the initial scene with her job interview, she kind of has that turned up to 11 kittenish look when she's looking at him, and it's like, okay, that's how porno girls look when they're about to fuck a guy because they want something. And so she just almost never loses a beat in any of these scenes. And we talked about the sex scene, the outdoor sex scene with the Jamie-Gillis character, Lou. That's the sort of scene that's usually the big problem solving aria at the end of a movie that it cements their romantic bond, and that they become a unit at the end of the film. And she even does that beautifully well. So I just can't imagine anyone else carrying this film the way she does. It's truly extraordinary. And then we know that the movie cost $100,000. They had a 5-day shooting schedule, and there were no rehearsals. It's just breathtaking what she's able to do.
Veronica Hart was one of my absolute first favorites. She was like the actress that kind of actually got me in to watching more classic adult and really getting into it. She's amazing. I think Tish Ambrose does not get enough respect though, because Tish is so underrated, and she's vulnerable here. She's adorable. She's very funny. And she could do more. Again, another one of those, not unlike Ron, where, she could do dramatic and didn't really, I don't think she always got the most amount of opportunities to do that. But definitely check out Roger Watkins' American Babylon, which is a masterpiece and one of my favorite films of all time. And she's absolutely perfect in that.
And when we talk about Ron's dramatic work, I strongly urge people to check out the story of Prunella, sort of a noir rape and revenge film that the Avon people put together, directed by Phil Prince. That's a much, much darker inflection of the Ron Jeremy persona, and he does a great job. And it's incredibly downbeat ending, and he just hits it out of the park. It's fantastic.
On a shallow note, she looks stunning here. I mean, she is still a beautiful woman, but she I don't know, she's exquisite every way. So we're going to Veronica Hart fan club on this episode
absolutely, because
she is phenomenal, as as is Ron Jeremy. Yeah. Also check out Scoundrels if anybody's wanting to see his a more dramatic and darker side.
Oh God, that's a great film.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's another masterpiece. That's definitely tied with Firestorm as my favorite Cecil Howard film, which I know we lost Cecil recently, and he definitely needs to get, I mean, all of these artists do, but, as much as Metzger, which Radley deserves everything because he's an auteur and a genius too, but so does Cecil Howard. So I think everybody needs to, preserve his work and definitely seek him out.
I wonder what the copyright custody chain is like on the Howard films. What was the one that came out with the beautiful 2-disc thing about 5 years ago?
Oh, Neon Nights.
Neon Nights, right.
Which thank God I got my mitts on that when it was in print, because Lord only knows how much it's going for on eBay, because it's way out of print. But it's a great release of it. It's uncut. There's some great interviews with Jamie and Eric Edwards. It's the beautiful, beautiful release. And in a just world, every Cecil Howard film should get that kind of release. He's definitely Firestorm. That and Cafe Flesh were probably the films that got me into wanting to do more film writing. Of course, Sadian's in an all other category, but Mike has had to hear me wax poetic about Stephen. You're my student and I'm the master professor on that or something. Great stuff. Cecil's a master too.
I'd love to see beautiful DVDs of Snake Eyes and Scoundrels and Firestorm. We could geek out on Cecil Howard, but I strongly suspect that our host would like for us to get back to something else.
Yeah, sorry, Mike.
You're fine. Well, I used a line from Working Girl during the intro to this, and I have to say that as I was watching Wanda Whoops Wall Street, when I wasn't thinking about the Doris Day, Rock Hudson comedies, I was thinking about Working Girl and just how that would use some of the same ideas of Wanda Whoops Wall Street, and just that whole idea of the outsider coming in and having this strong business acumen, having this terrific body, though I have to say that Veronica Hart puts Melanie Griffith to shame, even on Melanie Griffith's best day. And in there, you get that woman versus woman conflict, which is very interesting because we don't have that in Wanda. Kevin, you brought that up about the one woman who is saying, just because you're a woman, I'm not going to treat you any differently. And the Sigourney Weaver character is being very vicious to the Melanie Griffith character in Working Girl. But I have to say that Working Girl, it's a fun comedy maybe, and I think that she ends up kind of winning at the end. But I have to say Wanda Whoops Wall Street has a lot more meat to it and just has a lot more to think about when it comes to this film, more than Working Girl. Working Girl is not a movie that I necessarily go back to very often, if at all, other than to possibly look at Sigourney Weaver. But and then the chemistry that Harrison Ford allegedly has with Melanie Griffith just isn't there. Whereas I feel the chemistry when it comes to Wanda Whips Wall Street, and just to your point earlier about the Wanda Whips Wall Street being shot in 5 days, no rehearsals, $100,000, versus this overly lavish, who was it, Mike Nichols that did Working Girl, and just that, obnoxious theme song and everything. It was too much. It was way too much, and just really didn't do very much for me at all. Whereas Wanda definitely kept my interest, and to your point, Heather, it moved along and left me wanting more, whereas I was pretty bored with Working Girl.
I have a funny story about Working Girl. I saw that film way too young because I was being a child of the 80s, and all of a sudden the household has pay cable. You're like, hey, there's an R-rated film and everybody's out or they're asleep. I'm going to see what's on. And Working Girl came on. And I was like, oh, I'll watch this. And the film somehow disturbed me and bored me. I don't know how anything could not go, because I found it unpleasant and boring, and that Carly Simon song is terrible. That song, as much as I didn't care for most of the music in Wanda, though I love the film. The People's Court theme, that Carly Simon song makes that sound like, I don't know, Neil Young's Harvest or something. I don't know. It's terrible. I was not a fan of Working Girls. Not the Lizzie Borden film. Lizzie Borden's cool, but I'm not.
A great movie.
Yeah, but the Melanie Griffith, and she was terrible. I'm sorry. I just did not. I didn't realize how much disgust I had for this film, Mike, until you brought it up. It's like the floodgate.
Well, while we're on the Melanie Griffith hater train, I think she's a wonderful actor, and she's done amazing work in a number of films. But one of the great lost, should have been made films was Brian De Palma's Body Double, with Annette Haven playing the role that went to Melanie Griffith. And De Palma said in a book that came out shortly after, a year or two after the film, that when it came down to it, the audition, the screen test between Melanie and Annette, there was really no comparison, that he just kind of had to go with Melanie. And I just don't believe that for a second. I don't. Annette Haven is a much, much better actor than, and certainly was at that time. The early 80s was not a golden age for, female Hollywood film acting. And I think, to this day, I'm pretty sure that someone at the studio, or possibly a theater chain, or someone with their thumb on the money artery, took De Palma aside and said, no, we're not going to have the porno chick in a major Hollywood film, because I cannot imagine how much better Annette would have been than Melanie was in that film. I just can't even imagine what it would be like to have that film to watch now, with Annette Haven in the lead role and explicit sex in it, both of which were the reasons that this idea for the movie came about. So it's certainly true, those out there in podcast land, all you folks, that the level of technical and artistic and acting skill that's on display in films like Wanda Whips Wall Street, it's at least the equal of the stuff that Hollywood can do. And I would argue that a Hollywood cast and crew and post-production team would just come completely unglued if they had to put together a feature film with the resources that Larry and his people and Veronica Hart were working with here. I think these guys are better than most of the Hollywood filmmakers, just straight up.
if I could get an interview with Annette Haven, I would do a body double episode because I really like that movie, but I really want to get the scoop from her on everything that happened beforehand.
Maybe that'll happen someday. That would be really, really cool. I know she's working on her memoir, so that's one of the things that one of the reasons that she's not as forthcoming in interviews and stuff as some other performers from that time is she's hard at work on a highly detailed website and on her memoirs, and so that's something that she would like to control. Annette always had a wonderful level of control over her career and sort of being in charge of how information comes out and when, and sort of who shepherds it into the world and who actually gets paid for it. Annette's just spot on with all that stuff.
All right, we are going to take another break, and we're going to play a preview for next week's show.
18 years in the business, and who can hold a candle to? You've got everything you want.
No, I don't. I want a baby. I'm going to adopt one.
Christina! Come on, Tina.
Thank you, Tina, darling.
I am not one of your fans! I don't want to do it. Why not? Don't leave me here. Scared.
Sorry, it has to be like this.
Why did you adopt me?
I wanted someone to love.
That is a lie.
That's right. We'll be back next week with a special for Mother's Day. It is the one, the only Mommy Dearest, where we'll be joined by Mr. Joshua Grinnell, a.k.a. Peaches Christ, also Terry Frost, the founder of Paleo Cinema Podcast. It is going to be too good to miss. But until then, Heather, what is the latest with you?
My website, Mondo Heather, is finally Mondo updated. You can read my piece on Emilio Dieras, and I hope to God I'm saying everything right. Everybody, my Spanish is usually no bueno, but it's his great 1967 film Placer Sangriento, a.k.a. Feast of Flesh, as well as guest writer Martin Billheimer's Radio City and the Recording Angel. And you can see all of that on mondoheather.com.
Very cool. And how are things happening with you, Kevin?
Oh, life is so great. Thank you for asking. This month or next, Vinegar Syndrome is going to come out with the first DVD in a series of restored releases from the husband and wife porn producing and directing team, Ed and Summer Brown. And that film is China Girl from 1974. And I'm on one of the extras interviewing Annette Haven about her decision to get into the X-Biz and the shooting of the film and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And I'm still hard at work on my book, From Beavis and Butthead to Tea Party Nation, Dumb White Guy Politics and Culture in America. But the problem with that book is the last chapter keeps getting weirder and weirder with every day that I look at my news feed. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm very excited to be teaching my porno class again in the spring semester, and I'm looking to bring a couple of guests in from both the old days period that we're discussing today and then more contemporary directors and performers. So that's all looking great. And I have 2 blogs that we will link to on the show notes or on your site.
Thank you guys for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. Please head on over to the website projection-booth.com where you can find out more about today's show and where you can find out those links over to Kevin's blog, over to Heather's site, and you also find links over to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and over to Patreon where you can make a donation to the show. Donors get early access to every episode as long as I am not running late. Every donation and every rating helps the Projection Booth take over the world.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.